For a century, making a major movie meant building a temporary city. If you wanted a medieval village, you had to physically construct it from the dirt up, and then populate it with hundreds of background actors. Behind the lens, an army of carpenters, painters, and riggers spent weeks turning wood and plaster into convincing palaces. The logistical footprint required to capture a few minutes of usable footage was massive. Because of that physical footprint, the financial risk was immense. A sudden rainstorm, a delayed permit, or a union scheduling conflict could burn millions of dollars in a single afternoon. Every second on set was a race against the budget. This graphic shows how reality fractured. On the left, the traditional physical crew. On the right, the camera and set converted into lines of code. Notice how the landscape emerges from text parameters, migrating the creative process toward generating pixels through language. The era of the movie set as a physical workshop is contracting. The production environment is migrating from the soundstage to the server, shifting the primary constraints from raw materials and physical labor to computational logic. Before a single frame is ever shot, producers historically spent weeks manually breaking down a script, highlighting locations, estimating costs, and mapping out a rigid shooting schedule by hand. This circular workflow visualizes the modern alternative. AI systems now ingest a screenplay and instantly extract the necessary locations, cast, and props to generate preliminary budgets and cohesive storyboards, cutting the initial visual timeline by 60%. This staircase graphic tracks how specialized platforms handle the heavier financial lifting. Software like FilmStage and Saturation.io automatically calculate complex union fringes, the mandatory payroll taxes and pension contributions, and flag potential budget overruns in real time as the production schedule shifts. Automating these line items removes the administrative friction that traditionally stalled independent films in development. It allows a small team to manage a level of organizational complexity that once required an entire production office. Once a production actually begins, geography is no longer a constraint. A crew doesn't need to secure permits in the Arctic or build a sprawling historical fortress in a remote desert. Instead, LED volumes and generative tools cast photorealistic three-dimensional worlds right behind the actors. A single digital projection curving around a dark studio space can rotate through a dozen distinct environments in a single day. This graph illustrates the economic shift driving the industry, the collapse of complexity cost. In a traditional physical shoot, the red line shows how visual ambition skyrockets the budget. But under algorithmic production, generating a massive historical army requires the same computational effort as generating an empty desert. When rendering a legion of soldiers costs no more than rendering a grain of sand, the financial barriers to epic storytelling vanish. Major studios no longer hold a monopoly on high-concept, sweeping narratives. Historically, once filming wrapped, post-production required months of manual, frame-by-frame labor to erase wires, separate actors from backgrounds, and stitch disparate visual elements together. As industry veterans like Ben Affleck have pointed out, AI is suited to absorb exactly this type of expensive, burdensome background labor, handling tasks like rotoscoping and matte painting that once ate up entire department schedules. This diagram shows the engines replacing that manual labor. Generative models like Sora 2, Veo Free, and Runway Gen 4.5. They deliver cinematic quality rendering instantly, without massive server farms. These systems autonomously simulate complex fluid dynamics, calculate physical lighting bounces, and upscale footage to a professional 4K resolution directly within the editing timeline. Post-production is no longer a rescue mission to fix mistakes made on set. It now functions as a real-time synthesis engine, allowing editors to generate and refine reality on demand. This flowchart maps the transition in production leverage. Where cinematic control once required the ownership of heavy physical assets, it now rewards the ability to translate creative intent into technical linguistic prompts. The director has transitioned from a field commander shouting through a megaphone at hundreds of crew members into a solitary systems architect negotiating directly with algorithms. The hybrid director occupies the intersection of these three disciplines. It is a role that combines the narrative foundations of a writer with the technical literacy of an engineer, using oral and visual data to guide the generative process. Instead of building a shot piece by piece, the director now acts as a critical filter. They must review a near infinite stream of generated variations, discard the algorithmic hallucinations, and isolate the exact output that serves the narrative. While these models can produce images that are aesthetically convincing, they operate on statistical averages, not intent. They can simulate a scene's appearance, but they cannot replicate the subtext of lived experience or human trauma. The sweat, lumber, and noise of the traditional backlot may be fading away into the quiet hum of cloud servers. Yet the ultimate value of a film still relies on the one element code cannot replicate: